Welcome to Islam. And this week, what we'll be doing is we'll study the religion of Islam, how it started, the messenger, and basically where we are today in modern day. Before I can start, I want you to know right now Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. All estimates have it in about two more generations. It will be the number one religion in the world, taking over Christianity. Right now, Christianity has about 2.3 followers in the world. Uh, Islam's right there, 1.9 billion. And so when I tell you it's right there, and in a couple of generations, we're expecting that it will take over. So you're talking about a religion that's followed by roughly quarter of the world's population follows this religion. And so it would be advantageous for you to really understand at least the basic principles of the religion, because with all estimates, someone in your family right now is probably follows Islam, or someone in your family will be eventually following Islam. And so why not understand something that eventually is going to be the number one religion in this world? And so to start, let me just break down the name Islam. Islam means peace and surrender. It's crazy how when I say Islam to my students today and I ask them what do they think when I say the word, everyone automatically goes to violence. It's a violent religion, 911. But Islam actually means peace and surrender. It's actually a peaceful religion. It's the opposite of violence. And so Islam gets a bad rep because of terrorists who have misinterpreted the religion and used the religion as a vehicle to carry out malicious acts in society. And so the way I want you to think about that is think about the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan is a terrorist group as well, a hate group, but they would consider themselves Christians. And would it be fair for us to say Christianity is a violent religion because look at the Ku Klux Klan over there? No, they are misinterpreting, perverting the religion to carry out their deeds. And I say the same for Islam. These terrorists are misinterpreting the religion to carry out their deeds and have shed a negative light on it. But I wanted to properly teach you this religion. So not so you can actually study it for yourself and read the scriptures in the Quran and the surahs for yourself, and then make the determination if you think it's a very dangerous or vicious religion. And I'm going to tell you that you're not going to find that. It's not an extremist. It's those extremists who have misinterpreted. So Islam means peace and surrender, and the word Muslim, one who follows Islam, what Muslim means is one who totally surrenders their will over to God. So today it's interesting how modern day Muslim scholars are now saying Jesus was Muslim. And I know the Christians are like, wait a minute, Dr. Tank, you're already going off the wall here. No, I want you to think about that. Was Jesus peaceful? Did Jesus surrender his will over to God? And if you say yes to both of those, then Jesus is Muslim. See, religion makes that sound very uncomfortable. But if you start reading things based off of their interpretation of what they actually mean, you'll realize that you're not saying anything crazy. You're just saying that Jesus submitted his will over to God. And so that's the way I want you to start thinking from the beginning of this study. And remember, this is not a spiritual study of Islam. So I don't want you Muslim followers to come at me and start messaging me, oh, you didn't say this or you say that. This is an academic study, more of an understanding Islam from a historical and academic standpoint, not necessarily a spiritual standpoint, all right? And so I want you to understand Muhammad was a very peaceful man. So much so that when there was fighting in the villages, they would call Muhammad to come out because he was known as the great mediator. He would come in and to settle disputes. and make you see both sides of an argument. So he was not considered a guy that would just go in and wipe people out. And we're going to see that as I start breaking Muhammad down, that he was a very peaceful man. So how does a man who was full of peace, who was very accommodating, I'll give you another example of Muhammad's generosity. Early in Muhammad's career, when they first established the mosque, Muhammad allowed Christians and Jews to use his mosque. Think about that today. How many Muslims do you know today with that spirit that Muhammad had, that would let Christians and Jews use their mosque? That's the kind of mentality I want you to understand. So just like I did with Christianity, I'm going to try to separate Jesus from the Christians, because unfortunately not too many Christians look like the Christ. And I have to do the same thing with Islam. I'm going to have to separate Muhammad from many of the Muslims that are misinterpreting the scriptures and misinterpreting the man. The man was a very loving and peaceful man. And he loved Christians. I'm going to say that again. He loved Christians and he loved Jews. So when you meet a Muslim who's anti-Christians and anti-Jews and very rebellious and very bucking up, they're nothing like the messenger. He wasn't that way. It's later on and misinterpreted and bad teachings that you now have a lot of people who are doing anti-religious movements against those who Muhammad called people of the book. All right, so let's get into this. So it's the youngest major religion in the world. It's the youngest one. So it comes after Judaism. It comes after Christianity. And the beautiful thing about being the youngest major religion in the world, you get to see all the mistakes your older brothers made. All right, so when you're the youngest, you get to see what your older brother did that mommy and daddy didn't like, and you can now fix your ways. And so one of the things that Islam gets credit for, of all the major religions in the world, it was the first religion to write it the fastest. They went from the oral tradition to the written tradition, and I'm going off the top of my head, somewhere between 23 to 40 years. It took Christianity and Judaism to write it down like 300, 500, thousands of years. So what Islam, being the baby, was able to do right away is to say, we don't want any problems with the misinterpretation of scriptures, so I want to get this down to the written word as soon as possible. All right, so that's the advantage. All right, if you study right quick, let's go back. I can't start talking about Islam and not talk about Christianity and Islam and Judaism. So I have to kind of back up a little bit. If you go into the Torah, which is the Jewish book of the law, right? Or if you go into the Old Testament in the Christian Bible, you will realize a man called Abraham. Abraham is significant in the Jewish story. Abraham is significant in the Christian story. Abraham, which we call in Islam Ibrahim, is significant in the Islam story. All right? And if you watch my videos, you'll know the point that I'm about to say right now. All three religions regard Abraham as the father of their faith. All three religions, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, all consider Abraham the father of their faith. Yet, they all don't see eye to eye. And the first thing I always ask the three groups is this: do you believe in Abraham? And they always say yes. And then I say, do you believe the God that you worship is the same God Abraham worships? And all three say yes. So you got three different religions, but yet all three of you say the God that Abraham worships is the same God you worship. You guys are all worshiping the same God. They're like, no, we don't. And so that's what I'm here to do. I'm trying to bring you guys together so you can start seeing that the divisiveness that you have is really religion. But if you start studying history and you start studying scripture and you start studying religions outside of your tradition, you'll start seeing how you guys are actually brothers and sisters and you all have the same daddy. All right. And so I want to start with Abraham. Abraham had two sons. So now if you're a Jew, go into your Torah. If you're a Christian, go into your Old Testament. And if you're a Muslim, you can go into the Quran. All right. Abraham had two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. All right. Isaac takes the Jews and the Christian route. Ishmael is more attributed to the Muslim route. What I want to bring up into all you guys that from all different religions, God, there's a bad interpretation going on that God blessed one of the sons and not the other. And so right now I'm speaking to the Christians and the Jews right now. Go into Genesis 16 verses 10, go into Genesis 21 verse 18. If you go into both of those sections, you'll see that God blesses Ishmael. He says to Ishmael that you are going to be a great and mighty nation, so much so that those many people will not be able to count. And if you look today, and the first thing I said on this video, they're predicted to be the #1 religion in the world as far as followers. Back to the prophecy that you will become a great nation and no one will be able to count, that I will increase your territory. And so the prophecy is coming in true in all three religions. And Islam is on pace to be exactly what was prophesied in Genesis. All right. So Abraham marries Sarah, and he marries an African woman called Hagar. All right. So we love to call her his slave, but that was his wife. All right. He had two wives, and he married two women. And the African who we consider Hagar is the one who births Ishmael. So you will, I'm saying that for a reason, because sometimes you will hear that Islam is a black man's religion. There's the argument there that the Ishmael's mother is Egyptian, which is on the continent of Africa. So he was actually African. All right. So that's where that argument can come from. The other thing I want to pose is that Islam is older than Muhammad. Let me say that again. The ideology of Islam, the beliefs, the practices are older than Muhammad. Muhammad comes somewhere around 622 to establish Islam. But before Muhammad, we had Ishmael and those who followed in Arabia, this principle of monotheism of one God. So I want to establish that very early in the study. Ishmael's name means God hears you. So there's a bad interpretation that Ishmael was cursed by God and all this other stuff. God tells his mom to call him, I hear you, all right? And that I hear your cry. And so my ear is to the people. And so I want to kind of dismiss this bad interpretation of who Ishmael was, who eventually becomes the Arabian people, who then gives us Islam. All right. The other thing I want to establish is that who was Muhammad? All right. So now we move all the way to, and I'm going off the top of my head. So if my dates are off, they'll probably be off by maybe a year or two. But if I remember correctly, Muhammad was born around 570. All right. And 570 CE. And if you think about it, that's 500 years after Jesus. So he had time to really understand who Jesus was. He knew very well who Jesus was. He studied, all right? He understood the religion very well. So he had an advantage of understanding Christianity, and he had an advantage of understanding Judaism because he was around the followers, all right? And so by age 8, Muhammad has no parents. He's an orphan in extreme poverty. So Muhammad has no mom or dad, living with his uncle, no real family, and he's in extreme poverty. That's very important to Muhammad's story, because if you study Islam, there's a passion for the disadvantaged. He always was concerned about the widow, the disadvantaged, the poor, and it's because he comes out of that context. That's how he started his life. And so he has a heart for those who are in marginalized situations. And he implores those who follow him to make sure you don't forget the poor. So when you think of things like Ramadan and giving alms, this is directly coming from the context that he comes from. All right. Muhammad, because of his background, could not read or write. He was illiterate, no formal education. And so here is this man who comes from really tough times, but develops and becomes a really good merchant, savvy businessman, very good with the help of his wife, who was a little older than him, we call Khadija. All right. He fell in love with her. She had a heart of gold, and he just loved how she just didn't see socioeconomic standards. She had a love for everybody, and he fell in love with this woman. And she was always like a wise counsel to him. Gave him suggestions, gave him ideas. And so one day, as Muhammad is off away meditating in prayer, he is visited in a cave by the angel Gabriel. And Gabriel then tells him, recite, 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 and gives him the word of God, which we call the Quran. It's recited to him. What makes this very unique? Most religious texts that we have is a story about God. What makes the Quran so unique? It's not a story about God. This book is saying this is God's words directly. And what I mean by that, it's like when you read the Bible, you read the book of Songs of Solomon. Let's just start there. Or Proverbs, or Matthew, Luke, John. You're reading someone's account of what God did in their life. What makes this different? This is not Muhammad's account of God. What Muhammad is saying is that this is God's direct words to him, and he's now saying it to the people. So now you're saying this is the direct translated word of God. That's why in Islam, many people say you should not translate the Quran. It was given to Muhammad in Arabic. It must stay in Arabic. You can read an English version, but if you really want the true version of what God said, you must learn Arabic to learn it, because they believe that it was given to Muhammad in Arabic, so it must stay that way. And so it's there's a big respect on this idea that you must not even interpret or change any of the wording, because this is directly the word of God. So I hope you get that point, because that's very important in understanding. So he gets this message from God, and he was terrified. He was shaken. He was confused, and he runs out the cave, and first person he encounters is his wife Khadija. And he's like, Khadija, I heard this voice, and some don't like this, but I'm gonna keep it real with you. One can say that Khadija really establishes Islam, because it was Khadija that calms him down and affirms to him that that wasn't a voice you heard from God. And Khadija really becomes the first Muslim. All right. And it's after being affirmed. And sometimes you hear something, but you question it, and you it's usually when you talk to that second person, and then you start gaining the confidence that yes, that was God. That's what Khadija was for Muhammad in the beginning. So Khadija is considered the first Muslim, the first convert, because she's the first one who says, yes, that was the voice of God. And so this changes. This message is clear, that God, if I can summarize everything that he heard in this cave, it was to say that God is but one God. And Allah, properly translated, really means the God. The God. So when you say the Shahada, there is no God but the one God, is what you're really saying. And Muhammad is his messenger. And so you gotta understand the context Muhammad's in right now. Polytheism is running rampant. Polytheism means that there is multiple gods, and he's in Mecca right now. Mecca was like literally the Mecca, which means the hub, the place where everyone around the world would go to worship their gods, plural. So there was thousands of gods in Mecca. There were thousands of sculptures and statues and idolatry and Jews and Christians. Mecca was just like this place full of religious diversity. And now you have this man that's coming out and saying there is but one God and the God, and everything else is false. That's a death threat to say during that time in Mecca. And so he was not received because his message posed a threat to the political structure. It posed a threat to the religious structure. It posed a threat to the business structure. If we say there's only but one God, now people will not come to Mecca anymore to worship. You're messing up a lot of things, Mr. Muhammad. Bro, you got two choices. You either leave Mecca or we're going to kill you. And so Muhammad at this point roughly has about 300 followers with him. And he is forced out of Mecca. And he does a pilgrimage to a place called Medina. And it's really and that's around 622 CE, which is now the Muslim academic calendar for the year 1. So the reason why they start at 622, many feel that it is at that point Islam is birthed. When he leaves Mecca and goes to Medina and starts establishing the religion. He gets to Medina, but guess what happens there? He's not really welcome there either. And so once they started hearing the message he's spewing out, that you can no longer have all these immoral practices in society, and that God was judging your hearts and he's looking at your deeds and he's seeing what you're doing right and he's counting the things that you're doing wrong. People weren't accepting of this message. Who is this guy? We know your background. You come from poor. You're not a prophet. Like, who are you? Every prophet has some kind of sign, some kind of message, some kind of works. We can go from Moses, we can go to Elijah, we can go to Jesus. There's signs, there's wonders. What can you do, Muhammad, that can tell us that you are really a messenger of God? And Muhammad answers, I have no special powers. All I can tell you is that my special power is that God spoke to me directly and gave me the Quran. And it's the Quran that's my special ability. And they're like, what? But I want you to really think about that. When you read the Quran, the knowledge in the Quran is actually way advanced, even scientifically, than what the people at that time knew. How the world was formed and the separation of the sea and land. That's way past the scientific knowledge of that time. Not only that, many scholars have said there's no grammatical errors in the Quran. How does one who is not formally educated, cannot read and write, produce a masterpiece? Some have even argued it's the only religious book with 0 contradictions. One can argue you can probably find some in there, so I'm not going that debate with you. But of all the religious books, we can agree it has the least. But yet produced by someone who can't read or write or have grammar. So it's at that point, some have argued he did hear from God. And it's a miracle that he was able to produce a work of such magnitude. The poetry alone inside the Quran is just one who would have advanced knowledge. And so many have articulated this is the biggest work supernaturally that Muhammad was able to produce, was this idea of creating the Quran. All right. And what distinguishes him is that he's saying this word, the God, Allah. And I want you to understand, don't get caught up in Allah. If you're a Christian, you would still pray to Allah if you lived in that area in Arabic. If you're a Jew, you still say Allah. So Allah is really the God. It's not a separate God. It's saying that there is but just one God. All right. The other thing that he wants to establish is that he is the last, the culmination of the prophets. He's the last messenger, meaning that what Muhammad, and this is another bad interpretation I see in Muslims today, they're trying to say Muhammad came to say that no to Jews, no to Christianity, and I'm the truth. He never did that. Muhammad came to say, I am the last of line of prophets, which means I am the continuation of Judaism. I am the continuation of Christianity, and I am the last phase. I'm the last part of it. That's a totally different interpretation of saying I'm the only way. Because remember, he thought he was a continuation. So that's why when you say Shahada, you then say Muhammad is the messenger, because you're now saying he is also one of the prophets that God sent, just like Abraham and all the other ones that we had before him. All right. And so he is establishing himself that he's the last prophet, the Quran was his miracle, and that he can establish himself as one of the people that that God directly sent to help the world. All right. And obviously, we're at a point now that 2 billion people are following him. The other thing I want to point out to you, there are 4 basic theological concepts with Islam. One is God is one. That is key. That's probably the biggest message you can get out of Islam. God is one. And if I ask Christian that, is God one? They'll say yes. If I ask a Jew that, is God one? They'll say yes. But yet, we're quarreling with one another. I would say, and I tell my students this all the time, Jews and Muslims fight the most, yet they're the of all religions, they're probably the most similar. They do the same things. Halal, kosher, same concept. One God, same concept. You do pilgrimages to sacred place, the Western Wall. They do Hajj. Same. When I tell you, if you start breaking down those religions, they're identical, but culture has separated them. As a matter of fact, if you do your history, early Muslims prayed towards Jerusalem. Jerusalem was considered sacred for Muhammad. That's what I'm trying to tell you. These parallels are there, man. You guys are fighting one another, but you're brothers and sisters. Yeah, so the only reason why Muslims do not pray to Jerusalem now is because Muhammad was rejected by the Jews. They said, you are not a line of our prophets. Do not even put your name in our sentence. And after being rejected by the Jews, Muhammad then says, after today, we will pray where Islam was born, and that's in Mecca. And so now, today, Muslims pray towards Mecca. But if the Jews accepted Muhammad, today Muslims would be praying towards Jerusalem. That's why you need to understand history. That's why you need to understand context. Then you'll understand why you do what you do. All right? There's 6 basic concepts in Islam. I'm going to run through them because I see I'm running out of time. God is one. All right? They believe also in angels. All right? So as you can see, the angel Gabriel who visited Muhammad in the cave. They believe in prophets and messengers of God. So they're not discounting all the messengers. You'll find Jesus in the Quran. You'll find Noah in the Quran. You'll find Mother Mary in the Quran. This is a continuation. What I would say that a Muslim, what differentiates them is that they believe that all the books before the Quran, when you talk about the Torah, the Talmud, you talk about the Old Testament, New Testament, have been corrupted in translation and transmissions, meaning that they've been messed with. The reason why they feel the Quran is different, no one has been able to tamper with it. One can argue that's not true, and I'll just give you something to study. When the Quran was originally written, we don't have the original manuscript of Quran. It was burned. So the Quran had to be written again. So one can argue, how do we know that it's the same exact words from the original translation when it was written the second time? A Muslim will say it is the exact words because Muslims at that time, and still a practice today, Muslims are trained to try to memorize the Quran from start to finish. And the reason why they ask you to memorize it is because they saw what happened to the Christian Bible as well as the Jews. And they know if you don't memorize it, someone can tamper with it. So the argument from the Muslim perspective is to say, if we have them memorized, when they burn the manuscripts, we can continue to write it again. And we would be able to know if something's not right because it's memorized. So that's the argument against it. They also believe in the other, I'm still going down to 6 basic concepts. They believe in the books, and that's plural. It's not just the Quran. You also have hadiths, you have other religious context books, but also you should believe in the Bible. I'm not saying everything in there, but a true studied Muslim should believe in components of the Bible as well as the components of the Torah, because you got your understanding of your religion through those books as well. All right. The other thing is you do believe in the Day of Judgment. It's very similar to the Christian Day of Judgment. The only thing I would say difference is that Muslims believe in deeds, and it's really going to be a scale, your good deeds versus your bad deeds, and you're praying that your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds. And based on that, you shall go to heaven. I know there's a conception that for Muslims, when they go to heaven, they're going to get 72 virgins eating grapes. I challenge you to find that in the Quran. It's not in there. That comes from the hadiths, and one could say that they don't have the same weight as the Quran, because the Quran is directly the word of God, whereas the hadith is more similar to what we see in classic religious texts, where it's interpreted through another experience. And so those are more the beliefs about Muhammad and things that Muhammad said or did through other people. All right. But when we talk about the Quran, this is directly from God. And then the last thing is this idea of predestination. You believe in this idea of predestination, so that there are certain people that's predestined. All right. And so that belief also was found through Christianity, that Islam did adopt into their religion. And I'm trying to keep showing you the parallels so you understand. All right. I'll end this study with the 5 pillars of Islam. All right, so I gave you the 6 basic theological concepts. I'll end it with the 5 pillars because I ran out of time. Number 1 is the Shahada. There is no God but the God, and Muhammad is his messenger. Every Muslim believer must confess and profess the Shahada, and that's what makes you a Muslim. So you must confess that there is no God but the God, Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger. And the reason why those 2 things are important, you gotta understand, they're in an area of polytheism. You now have to say that you believe in only one God and don't believe in multiple gods. And then remember, there's articulation that Muhammad is really not a prophet. So now they put that in there too. So you're not only saying that there is only but one God, you're saying that Muhammad is a prophet, a messenger of God. But another important concept, he is the final, the culmination, the last messenger of God. So that means if someone comes after him, you can easily say that's a false prophet. Because, and the other thing I want to tell you about Muslims, a true Muslim will understand this. When I say true, meaning that you're a studied Muslim. They believe in Jesus. It's not Muhammad or Jesus. It's Muhammad and Jesus. A Muslim that's studied, if I ask them where is Jesus right now, they should say, according to their studies, he's at the right hand of God. And they should say, he will be there the day of judgment. Yeah, Jesus will be there the day of judgment. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. When you hear Muslims spewing anti-Christian rhetoric, it should be only against that Jesus is God. But what I will say is true Christians, those who are studied, should be against that concept too, because if you look into my videos prior to this, I talk about this idea of the Trinity and the Council of Nicaea, and that's where you get this concept of Jesus is God. Prior to that, no one thought that. They thought Jesus was a messenger of God, just like we're saying Muhammad is a messenger of God. So that's really why most Muslims don't have a problem with Jesus. They have a problem with the interpretation that he is God or the Son of God. They would also argue against that as well. All right. Second pillar, prayer. Most Muslims, the mandate is for them to pray 5 times a day. But originally, what was actually said to Muhammad was for Muslims to pray 50 times a day. And you should be thankful for Muhammad. He negotiated with God and had a conversation with God and said, that is too much to ask for. We have busy lives, we have things going on. It's going to be too much for a believer to pray 50 times a day. So Muhammad reduces, after the negotiation with God, he reduces the 50 prayers a day to 5 times a day. And it's crazy. Some Muslims aren't even praying to 5. Like, you should be praying 50, but he reduced it down to 5, and you're not doing your 5 times a day. So make sure that you're getting your 5 times a day prayer in. So make sure that's where that comes from. So just different times of the day. I was in Africa maybe about 10 years ago, and I was sitting in a car, and then I heard Allah Akbar. And I'm like, what in the world's going on? And when I tell you, it was like the whole country stopped and everybody went to prayer. People were getting out of their cars and just everyone. It was the most organized, unified moment I've ever seen in my life, where it felt like everyone in the country was praying to God, facing the same direction at the same time. And so that's the beautiful thing about prayer. It brings this uniqueness, this oneness, where everyone is submitting to God. Number 3, giving alms to the poor. Remember, I told you earlier, this comes from the context of Muhammad's upbringing. He had a heart for people who are marginalized, disadvantaged in society. So in the principles and the pillars of Islam, one of the things is that you have to give roughly 2.5% of your income back to the poor. So Christians and Jews have this idea of 10%, which we call tithe. But for Muslims, it's 2.5%. But the difference, Christians and Jews give to the church and the synagogue. What you have the ability to do in Islam is not only give it to the mosque, but you can actually give it to the poor people directly. That's really the instruction. It is not to go to the mosque. It's to give it to the people directly. So I have I have a lot of Muslim friends. I know some of them go to Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and go to communities that are really struggling with poverty and give 2.5% of their income. Help people go to school, establish scholarships and things like that to really help people who are disenfranchised. So understand, that was the point of it. And so it's a beautiful thing to see that if you're following it, but it's not supposed to be something that you're flashing. You're not supposed to go and post, I'm about to give 2.5% of my income up to the poor. It's supposed to be something that you do in humility, through humbleness, secretly, and let God give you the increase. All right. Number 4, fasting. Ramadan. Once a year, there's this fast, usually a month-long fast that happens, and it's not off the calendar year, it's off the lunar calendar year. So it can rotate. Sometimes you'll notice it's in the fall, like close to winter time, and then sometimes it's in the dead heat of the summer. This year it was close to, I believe, towards the end of spring. So Ramadan can change based off the lunar calendar. And so what it is a time where you do not eat or drink from sun up to sundown. And again, that's a practice which is adopted from Christianity and Judaism. You're called to fast. Fasting brings you closer to God. That's a practice out of Judeo-Christian context. And so what Muhammad's spin on fasting was this: it's not only going to bring you closer to God, but it should remind you of the poor. Remember, Muhammad has a heart for the poor. So he put the fasting. So when you're hungry and you feel those stomach pains, it should let you know what people feel every day in their normal lives. And it should give you a heart for the poor. So some people don't realize that's the point of the Ramadan. And so, they don't eat all day, and then when it come all night, they start pigging out. But actually, properly taught, you're not supposed to even pig out at night. You're supposed to eat just enough to carry you into the next day. And so that's actually a sin or a gluttony, a rule against the principle. So you should not be eating till you're overstuffed so you have enough for the next day. No, you should eat just enough, because the reason why you're doing it is so you can relate to those who don't have. All right. And then it brings you closer to God. All right. And then the last pillar is Hajj. Hajj is a pilgrimage that you go to. And it is in Mecca at least once in your lifetime. The requirement is for you to go. If you can go more, that would be great, but at least once. And Muhammad understands not everyone's going to be able to go. So some people are able to make it, some people are not able to make it. But if you are healthy enough to make it and financially capable of making, you should make that pilgrimage. And when you do the pilgrimage, it changes your name, and you'll see a classic example would be Malcolm X. When he went and did this Hajj, he changed his name to El Hajj Malik Shabazz. All right, so what happens is you put that Hajj in your name, and that distinguishes and let people know that you've made the pilgrimage. Hajj is a very powerful moment in your life. Not only are you going back to the place, the original where it started, but also you're seeing all people, all walks of life, all doing the same things. That means if President Barack Obama went to Hajj, there was no special place for Hajj. He would be right next to the peasant on the floor with his face to the ground. It's a humbling, unique oneness. We all do the same thing. And it was Hajj that changed Malcolm X. Remember, Malcolm X had a very anti-white rhetoric. But after Hajj, he then saw white people with blue eyes calling him brother and praying next to him. And they did not see him as inferior. They saw him as the same. It was that experience that changed Malcolm X and made him see everyone who believes in God and loves God as his brother. And so that's the power experience of Hajj. And I'll end this with Islam is misunderstood, but all it is a religion that is really saying we should just worship one God. We should submit our entire will over to God. We should be peaceful people. But if anyone threatens or tries to disrupt God's dominion or God's people, you should defend the faith. All right? And a classic example, many people say, Muhammad was this guy that was just killing people. That is partially true, but I'm going to tell you why. When Muhammad went to Medina, he wasn't welcome there either. And they were trying to assassinate him there too. And they was trying to basically kill this idea of Islam, all right? Because it was threatening the political and the economic structure of that time. Muhammad then defends himself. He wasn't the aggressor. According to the faith, you can defend the faith. And it was only 300 of them. They beat an army of 10,000. 300 versus 10,000. It is at that point many people said, this guy must know God. And now many people joined Islam. And he comes back to Mecca, not killing everybody, but from 300 to about 10,000 followers. And the reason why I'm saying he's not this terroristic guy that people make him to be, when Muhammad came back to Mecca with 10,000 followers, and now he's not only a religious leader, a savvy businessman, but now he's a military general that is really good. He then did not kill the Christians, did not kill the Muslims, Jews, did not kill the polytheistic. He said, we're going to take down all these idols, and whatever you want to believe, you can believe. We won't take you. It's only if you're coming against us, we will defend ourselves. So if Muhammad was this vicious, terroristic individual, he would have came back. Mind you, these are the same people that was trying to kill him. He could have came back with revenge and killed everyone in Mecca. He never did that. He always was diplomatic. That goes back to his days as a mediator, and allowed people to still believe what they wanted to believe and never force Islam down anyone's throat. In just a span of 10 years, from 622 to 632 when he dies, he builds basically a religion that takes over the whole Middle East, all right? Empire, builds an empire. And then when he dies, there now becomes a split between what you now call Sunni and Shiites. Why? Because there was a fight between who should succeed Muhammad. Would it be his father-in-law or his son-in-law? Father-in-law are the Sunnis, who are more conservative. Those who believe the son-in-law should have took over are your Shiites. And today you still see that shift between the Sunnis and the Shiites. Yes, I can go into a lot more, but I am way over the time. Maybe I do a part 2, but this is the understanding of Islam. I hope you learned something from it, that it's about peace and surrender and total submission to God. You should never be the aggressor. You should be one who actually look for peace first, and then you defend your faith later. And so I know there's a popular word called jihad that is in the Quran, but it doesn't speak to killing people. It's talking about the struggle within oneself. Jihad is supposed to be personal. It's not an ability to go and just wipe people out who disagrees with you, because Muhammad didn't do that. And I just showed you a clear example when he went back to Mecca. The people who was trying to kill him, when he comes back peacefully, all right, and takes over Mecca. One scripture I want to leave you with, Al-Talaq 65:1-3. It talks about whoever puts all his trust in Allah, he will be enough for him. Whoever puts all his trust in Allah, he will be enough for him. If you read the Quran, if you study the historical context, many of the misconceptions and ideologies that you have of Islam will actually fade away, and you will see them as your brother or sister who's following the God like you are. All right, that's what I have. If I have a part 2, if you come in my inbox or in my DM, if you want a part 2, and I'll try to break down more of Islam. But this is what we have for this week. Have a good week. Thanks for listening. Dr. Ting, subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe, and keep following, and I'll get you more religious videos. All right, peace.